The snow had been falling since before dawn. By the time the light came, pale and thin through the clouds, it had settled over everything. The field, the tree line, the silence itself. And that's when I saw it, a shape in the middle of all that white, small, motionless. So small I almost missed it entirely. A Pallas's cat kitten, alone in the open snow, maybe 8 weeks old if that. Its thick gray fur dusted with frost, its round, flat face turned outward, not toward safety, not toward the trees, but toward something moving at the edges of the field. 4 wolves, and they were circling. I want you to understand something before we go any further. Pallas's cats are not like the cats you know. They are ancient animals, compact, dense, built for cold and rock and silence. They are ambush hunters, not built for open ground, not built for this. And this kitten, it had nowhere to go. The wolves moved the way predators move when they aren't in a hurry. Slow, wide arcs, controlled, patient, each step deliberate, pressing just slightly into the snow. They weren't hungry enough to rush, they were calculating, and the kitten didn't run. That was the first thing that stopped me cold. It crouched low, almost flat against the ground, its belly nearly touching the snow. Ears pulled slightly back, eyes wide open, not blinking. I could see, even from where I stood at the tree line, that it was breathing fast. Small chest rising and falling in quick, shallow pulls. But it stayed exactly where it was. I've spent years in this forest. I know most animals have a threshold, a point where instinct takes over and they bolt, or freeze, or fight. This kitten had passed that threshold a long time ago. What I was watching wasn't calm. It was something beyond fear, something that had gone very still on the other side of panic. The wolves tightened the circle. 3 of them hung back, reading the space, watching the kitten's feet for signs of movement. The 4th, larger than the others, moving with the quiet authority of experience, stepped ahead of the group, closer than the others, close enough, and then it stopped. I don't know what I expected to happen next. I've seen predation before. I know what it looks like when the calculation is finished and the decision is made. I've watched it and I've understood it, because that's the nature of this place. Nothing out here is cruel. It simply is. But the wolf stopped. It stood there, head low, studying the kitten with something I can only describe as hesitation. Not fear, not confusion exactly. Something quieter than that, like a question it didn't quite have the answer to. The kitten hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, hadn't done anything an animal in that position is supposed to do. And that stillness, that complete, unnatural stillness, seemed to be the one thing the wolf hadn't planned for. Behind me the forest held its breath. I held mine. The other 3 wolves slowed, not retreating, not advancing, just pausing, reading the lead wolf for a signal that hadn't come yet. The kitten's eyes stayed open, fixed forward. I've tried many times since that morning to explain what happened in those next few seconds, the way the field seemed to shrink around that small gray shape, the way the cold felt sharper suddenly, like the air itself was paying attention. I can't explain the wolves. I can't tell you what moved through whatever passes for thought in an animal that size, in that moment. What I can tell you is this: the lead wolf was close enough to end it. The angle was right, the opportunity was there, and instead of striking, it hesitated. Something was changing. I could feel it before I could see it, a shift in the quality of the silence. The wolves felt it too. I watched their ears come up, almost in unison, heads turning slightly, not toward the kitten but outward, toward the tree line on the far side of the field. The kitten opened its mouth, and it called. Not a hiss, not a growl, something rawer than that. A sound that cut across all that open snow and cold air and landed somewhere in my chest I didn't expect. It wasn't a sound of defiance, it was a sound of need. And everything in that field, the wolves, the wind, the snow still drifting quietly from the gray sky above, went absolutely still to hear it. The call faded into the cold air, and then, nothing, no answer from the trees, no movement at the edge of the field. Just the wind moving low across the snow, and 4 wolves standing in a loose circle around a kitten that had just done the one thing it had left to do, asked for help. Whether help was coming, that was the part none of us knew yet. The wolves didn't move immediately after the call. That surprised me. I expected the sound to trigger something, a lunge, a scatter, some kind of decisive action. Instead, they held their positions, ears rotating slowly, reading the air the way wolves do when something has entered the equation that wasn't there before. They were listening, not to the kitten, to whatever might be listening back. I need to tell you something about Pallas's cats that most people don't know. They are solitary animals, deeply solitary. A mother and her kittens will stay together through the first several months. She teaches them to hunt, to hide, to read danger, but outside of that window, these animals move through the world almost entirely alone. They don't call for each other across open ground. They don't announce themselves. Silence is survival for a Pallas's cat, which meant that call, that raw, carrying sound the kitten sent out across the snow, was not a casual thing. It was everything the kitten had left, and somewhere, I found myself hoping something had heard it. The lead wolf lowered its head again. The hesitation from before was fading. Whatever had given it pause, the stillness of the kitten, the strangeness of the moment, was beginning to dissolve back into instinct. I could see it in the way the wolf's weight shifted slightly forward, in the way the others began to close the circle again, quiet and steady, reading the lead wolf the way they always do. The kitten hadn't moved. Its breathing was faster now. I could see that even from the tree line, small body working hard, eyes still open, still fixed forward. One front paw pressed flat into the snow, the other slightly tucked beneath it, like some part of it was still making a decision it hadn't finished yet. The wolves took another step, then another. I've thought about that moment 100 times since. What the right thing to do was. Whether there was a right thing, I'm not a person who intervenes lightly out here. This forest has its own logic, its own balance, and I've learned over many years that my presence, my interference, can do more harm than the thing I'm trying to prevent. A predator that learns to associate humans with interrupted hunts becomes unpredictable. An animal rescued from one danger and left dependent is just being delivered to a slower one. I know all of that. I believed all of that standing there at the tree line that morning. And I still couldn't make myself leave. The lead wolf was very close now. The kitten made a small sound, not the call from before, something quieter, almost involuntary, and pressed itself lower against the snow. Its ears flattened completely. Its eyes had gone from wide and fixed to something that looked almost resigned. I took a step forward out of the trees. Just one step, enough to be visible if anything looked my direction, not enough to commit to anything I couldn't take back. The snow crunched under my boot. None of the wolves turned. The cold was deep that morning, the kind that settles into your hands before you notice it, that makes your eyes water slightly at the edges. I remember being aware of my own breath, small clouds appearing and disappearing in front of my face, and thinking, without quite meaning to, that the kitten's breath was doing the same thing. This small, visible pulse of warmth in the middle of all that cold, still there, still going. I took another step. The lead wolf's ear flicked in my direction. Just one ear, a small acknowledgement that something had shifted at the edge of its awareness, but it didn't turn, didn't break focus. The circle was very tight now, and that's when I heard it. From somewhere deep in the tree line on the far side of the field, not where I was standing, the other side entirely, a sound moved through the forest. Low, directional, something between a call and a warning. It wasn't loud, but it carried. Every wolf in that field lifted its head at the exact same moment. The lead wolf took a full step back from the kitten, not retreating, just realigning, facing the far tree line now instead of the small gray shape crouched in the snow below it. The other 3 wolves turned as well. Something was coming, and whatever it was, the wolves weren't sure yet whether they wanted to be standing in the middle of an open field when it arrived. I stopped moving. The kitten hadn't looked toward the sound. It was still facing the wolves, still crouched, still working through each breath one at a time, but something in its posture had shifted, so slightly I might have imagined it, a fraction of tension released from somewhere along its spine. The tucked paw pressing a little more firmly into the snow, like it was steadying itself, like it had heard the sound too, like it recognized it. The wolves stood perfectly still, listening, waiting. I took one more step forward, and at that exact moment, a shape appeared at the far edge of the field, moving fast out of the shadows of the tree line, low to the ground, dense, purposeful, and I understood, before I could fully see it, exactly what I was looking at. She came out of the trees like weather, not fast in the way of panic, not wild or loud or reckless. She moved the way something moves when it has already made its decision and is simply closing the distance between where it is and where it needs to be. Low to the ground, steady, direct. A Pallas's cat, fully grown, thick-coated, built like stone wrapped in fur, crossing open snow toward 4 wolves without slowing down. I don't have a word for what I felt watching that. I'm not sure one exists. She covered the ground quickly but controlled, every step placed with intention. Her thick tail carried low and level behind her. Her round, flat face pointed straight ahead, not at the wolves, not yet, at the kitten. The kitten saw her coming. I watched something move through that small body. Not relief exactly. Animals don't work that simply. But the locked, airless stillness of the past several minutes shifted. The kitten's ears came up slightly. Its weight redistributed, no longer pressed flat against the ground. The mother reached it in seconds. She didn't nuzzle it, didn't slow down to check it over. She moved past it, one fluid motion, and placed herself between the kitten and the wolves. Then she stopped, and she faced them. 4 wolves, 1 cat. She was a third of the size of the smallest wolf in that circle. Smaller than that, maybe. A Pallas's cat in full winter coat looks larger than it is, all that dense, long fur adding volume that isn't really there. Beneath it, the body is compact, built for rock and scrub and cold, not for this. She knew that. She had to know that. She faced them anyway. Her posture was nothing like the kitten's had been. Where the kitten had flattened and stilled, she was upright, coiled, every part of her surface level calm, but underneath it, tight as a held breath. Her eyes moved across all 4 wolves without rushing, the way you read a room when you've walked into something dangerous and need to understand it completely before you act. Her ears were up, her tail didn't move. The wolves hadn't expected this either. I could see it in the way they'd repositioned, no longer a tight circle, more of a loose spread. The 4 of them fanned slightly apart as she'd crossed the field. The lead wolf had retreated a full body length from where it had been standing over the kitten, not fleeing, recalibrating. This was not normal prey behavior. A Pallas's cat mother defending a kitten against wolves is not a common thing. It is not a rational thing by the cold mathematics of survival. The outcome of that engagement, run the numbers any way you want, does not end well for the cat. She was there anyway, standing in the snow between her kitten and 4 predators, offering nothing but her presence and whatever it was she was communicating through every line of her body. This is not a free thing. This will cost you something. The lead wolf took a slow step forward. The mother didn't move. It took another. She lowered her head, just slightly, and something changed in her eyes. A narrowing, a deepening of focus that even I could read from 40 feet away through cold air. The wolf stopped. Behind it, one of the others shifted position, circling wider, testing the edges of the situation the way wolves do, looking for the angle, looking for the easier read. The mother's head turned, just enough to track it, then back to the lead wolf. She was watching all of them at once. That's when I made my decision. I don't know if it was the right one. I've turned it over many times since, the way you turn over any moment where you stepped into something larger than yourself and can't fully know what your presence changed. What I know is that I couldn't stand there anymore. I stepped out of the tree line fully, both feet into the open snow. I was aware of how exposed I was, how visible, how the geometry of the field had just shifted with me in it. I shouted, not words, just sound, loud, sudden, directional, the kind of noise that doesn't belong in a quiet morning field and every animal within range knows it. I grabbed a branch from the edge of the tree line and threw it hard into the snow between myself and the wolves. It hit and scattered a spray of white into the cold air. Every wolf turned toward me. For a moment, nothing moved. The wolves read me the way they'd been reading the cat, quickly, fully, calculating what I represented and what I might do next. I kept moving forward, slow but continuous, no stopping, keeping my body large and my noise steady. The mother hadn't moved from her position. The kitten was directly behind her, pressed close but not touching, watching everything. One of the outer wolves took a step back, then another. The lead wolf held for 3 long seconds, eyes on me, then on the cat, then back to me, running whatever final calculation it had left to run. Then it turned. They didn't run. Wolves rarely do. They withdrew the way they'd arrived, measured, unhurried, preserving the dignity of the choice even as they made it. One by one they pulled back from the center of the field, widening the space, moving toward the far tree line without urgency. The last one paused at the edge of the shadows and looked back. Not at me, at the cat. One long, flat look. Then it turned and was gone. The field went quiet again. The mother stayed exactly where she was for a long moment after the wolves disappeared, ears up, eyes on the tree line, not trusting the silence yet, reading it, testing it, making sure. I stopped moving. I stood still and let the quiet settle. After what felt like a long time, her tail moved. Once, slow, some small release of held tension working its way out through the only part of her that had given anything away. She turned and looked at the kitten. The kitten looked back at her. Something passed between them that I wasn't part of and couldn't name. Then she turned toward the near tree line. Her tree line, the direction she'd come from. She started walking, not rushing, not looking back, and the kitten fell in behind her, matching her pace, staying close, two shapes moving through the snow toward the shadows at the edge of the field. I watched them go, and I realized, standing there in the cold with my heart still loud in my chest, that the danger wasn't fully over. The wolves had withdrawn, but withdrawn isn't gone, and a mother with a kitten still exposed on open ground, still a long way from cover. I kept watching until the trees took them. The tree line swallowed them whole. One moment they were there, two shapes moving through the snow, the smaller one tucked close behind the larger, and then the shadows shifted and they were simply gone, as if the forest had opened just enough to take them back and then closed again behind them. I stood in the middle of that field for a long time after, just standing, breathing, letting the cold come back in around me now that the thing I'd been holding myself against had passed. The snow had started falling again, light, almost weightless, settling over the tracks in the field, over the place where the kitten had stood alone, over the wide circling impressions the wolves had pressed into the white ground, covering everything, slowly, the way mornings out here always do. I walked the perimeter of the field before I left. I don't know exactly why. Some need to mark it, maybe, to walk the ground where the thing had happened and let my feet confirm what my eyes had seen. The wolf tracks were deep and clear, 4 sets, wide-gated, converging toward the center and then spreading back out toward the far tree line. You could read the whole story in the snow if you knew how to look. The kitten's prints were small, almost impossibly small for something that had just survived what it survived, concentrated in one spot near the center of the field, no running, no zigzagging, just that one motionless point where it had stood and held and called out across the cold. And then the mother's tracks arriving fast from the far side, straight line, no hesitation in the stride, crossing the field with the kind of directness that doesn't leave room for second thoughts. I stood over that spot for a while, where her tracks and the kitten's tracks met. I want to be honest about something. I've told this story a few times since that morning, and every time I get to this part, someone asks me whether the mother knew, whether she understood what she was walking into when she came out of those trees. I don't know how to answer that. What I know is what I saw. A sound carrying across snow. A shape appearing at the tree line. A straight, unwavering line crossed in full view of 4 predators, with nothing waiting at the end of it but risk. Whether that's knowing or something older than knowing, I'm not the right person to say. What I can say is that it looked, from where I was standing, like a choice. I went back to my cabin that evening and I didn't sleep much, not from fear. The fear had burned off somewhere in the middle of that field. Something else kept me up. The image of the kitten crouched in the snow. The quality of that stillness, the sound it made when it had nothing left but sound, and the mother, coming out of the dark like she'd always been coming, like the distance between them was just a formality to be closed. I made tea I didn't drink, watched the window, listened to the wind working through the trees outside. Somewhere out there, in whatever hollow or rock shelter or dense thicket had become their temporary world, a mother and her kitten were spending the night the way Pallas's cats have spent nights in this landscape for thousands of years, close, hidden, warm against the cold in the way that only nearness can make you warm. I found that thought steadying. 3 days passed. I went about the work of the place, checking the trail cameras, clearing the path to the eastern ridge, the ordinary rhythms that hold a life like mine together. The snow came once more and then stopped. The temperature dropped overnight and then leveled off into the kind of cold that simply stays, neither worsening nor lifting, just present. I didn't go back to the field right away. Part of me didn't want to. There's a thing that happens sometimes when you've witnessed something you weren't meant to witness, a reluctance to return to the place, as though going back might somehow unmake it, might reduce it to just a field in the snow. But on the fourth morning something pulled me back. The light was better that day, softer, the kind that comes when the clouds thin without fully breaking and everything takes on an even, quiet glow. I walked the path from the cabin through the trees and came out at the edge of the field the same way I always do, through the gap in the birches where the ground slopes down slightly before leveling out. I stopped before I reached the open ground. There, along the edge of the field, right at the border where the packed snow of the tree line gives way to the softer, undisturbed surface of the open space, were tracks, fresh ones, small paw prints, clean-edged, pressed firmly into the snow, moving parallel to the tree line, not crossing into the open field, staying smart, staying covered, but there, present, following alongside the larger prints that moved beside them. 2 sets, side by side. I crouched down and looked at them for a long time. The kitten's prints were slightly uneven, one side pressing a fraction deeper than the other, the gait not quite settled yet into the easy, rolling stride of an older animal, still finding its way, still learning the weight of its own body against the ground, but moving well. The larger prints beside them were steady and even, unhurried, the kind of tracks an animal leaves when it isn't being chased, isn't hunting, isn't afraid, just moving through its territory the way it has always moved, the way it will keep moving. I put my hand near the prints, not touching, just near, and felt something I don't have a clean name for. Not happiness exactly, something quieter than that, something that felt like it had been sitting in my chest for 4 days waiting for this moment to attach itself to. I stood up and looked out across the field. Empty now, just snow and light, and the far tree line dark against the pale sky. No movement, no shapes. Whatever had happened in this place 4 days ago had been absorbed back into the ordinary life of the forest, the way everything out here eventually is. But the tracks were there. The tracks were there. And standing at the edge of that field, in the cold and the quiet, I found myself thinking about all the mornings I'd walked this path and seen nothing. All the times the forest had kept its life hidden from me, running its ancient business just out of sight, just beyond what I could see or hear or reach. How much of it happens without a single witness? How much of it has always happened, out in the cold, in the dark, in the deep places between the trees, and never needed anyone to see it? That kitten didn't survive because I was there. I want to be clear about that. I played a small part at the edge of something that was already in motion before I took a single step out of those trees. The mother had already crossed the field. The kitten had already held. What happened in that field happened because of them, because something in a small gray animal, alone in open snow, chose to stay still and send its voice out across the cold instead of running. And because something in a mother, moving through whatever ancient, wordless understanding drives an animal back toward its young, heard it, and came. I've spent a lot of years in this forest. I've seen things I couldn't explain and things I understood too well. I've learned, slowly and with some difficulty, to hold this place lightly, to be here without needing it to perform for me, to let the wild be wild and find my own meaning in the margins of it. But some mornings stay with you. Some things press themselves into you in a way that doesn't fade with the season or the next year's snow. And on the mornings when I walk out to that field now, in whatever light the sky has decided to offer, in whatever cold the season has settled into, I look at the edge of the tree line, I look at the open ground, I think about a sound carrying across snow, and I remember, even the smallest life out here is held by something. Even the most alone thing in the world has somewhere, something moving toward it. That's what the tracks told me. That cold, quiet morning, kneeling in the snow at the edge of a field where something impossible had happened, and then simply continued, that's what I understood. And in that frozen moment, I realized something I'll never forget. Even the smallest life in the wild is never truly alone.